Yes, you read the title right. The Super Mario Bros. Franchise has always been one of my favorites to experience. I always loved how diverse the franchise was. Whether it was jumping over Koopas, bashing against my friends' carts, traversing massive landscapes, or even playing a board game, the Mario franchise always proved to me that it wasn't just a gaming franchise. It was something special. Now, when people think of Mario, they picture the Golden Age. Super Mario Bros. 3, Super Mario 64, Super Mario Bros. 2, or wait, maybe not that one. But I've always wanted to dig beyond those titles and play the games that even some of the biggest Mario fans don't know about. So I had a little idea. A little idea that's probably about to cost me the rest of my life. What if I played every Mario game? And ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what I've done. Alright, hold up. Let's rewind. To save some of my sanity, I've slated some rules for this journey. For one, each video is going to be segmented in half a decade. I don't think it would be physically possible for me to dive into every single Mario game in one video unless I had a gun to my head. Wait. One of the rules that I'm required to play at least half of the game's confirmed length, or in cases of which the game is over 20 hours, at least a quarter of the game's confirmed length. That way, I can still suffer for you all, just slightly less than whoever programmed Hotel Mario. Finally, for spin-off franchises, I have to at least play on all of the maps in full at least once. Yes, that means all of the maps in the Mario parties, and even the retro tracks in the Mario Kart, because apparently, I just hate my own free time. So, without further ado, let's start this journey with the first 5 years of the franchise. Let's-a go. God, that just felt so corporate to say, my god. Starting off with Donkey Kong for arcade systems, and oh boy, what a game to start off with. There's just something so iconic about the sounds, the sprites, the levels, and the addictiveness. I could spend hours on this game. Who knew a game about a monkey throwing barrels would be the reason I'm spending $80 on a racing game this June? I'll be honest, there was no way for there to possibly have been a better title to start off the franchise, but god, we need to talk about how janky this game is. Listen, I get it's a game from 1981. Its only competitor was, but come on! Sometimes my score wouldn't register when I would jump over barrels, or I would get stuck on ladders, or I would die if I was even fractionally too high for a jump. And my god, the difficulty here is ridiculous! I know it's an arcade game, but the enemies in this game come flying at you like they're nuclear fish and warheads. Overall, this game is a great title, no doubt about that, but the reason it falls short of a decent score is because it simply just doesn't hold up to the standards that we hold arcade games to nowadays. Listen, all I can say is that we'll hopefully just go up from here. I said up, just remember that. Crazy Kong for arcade systems. Okay, who looked at Donkey Kong and said, we could do this, but what if we didn't? Yeah, so this is a Japanese exclusive release made by the company Falcon due to a shortage of Donkey Kong arcade cabinets. As you can tell by the deep-fried Donkey Kong and the absence of the company name in the title screen, this was a release made out of shame. Firstly, the sprite work is horrendous here. I do like how Mario ironically looks like his newer NES counterpart, but who the f is that?
You're right, this is a toaster.
And if the eye-piercing visuals aren't enough for you, just open your ears. Not only did they remove the iconic hammer music, which is extremely ominous, but the rest of the game sounds like this. Gameplay-wise, this game is extremely similar to Donkey Kong, even including the score glitches, but it also varies in some interesting ways. For one, I noticed that 50M has conveyor belts in this release, and eggs as enemies? I also noticed that the game says how high can you try instead of how high can you get here. Well, perfect. Now my self-esteem is taking a hit before the game even started. Was this game made by a vegetarian or a sadist? This game is flat out bad. It could have been an okay idea on paper, but its potential is completely wasted here. This is definitely not a good sign of the future, but at least we don't have to deal with any more Crazy Kong, and we can just simply deal with the one stain on the franchise. Crazy Kong Part 2 for arcade systems. Hey look, Falcon isn't ashamed anymore. That must mean they're at least proud of their work this time around. Well, that makes one of us. The least I can say here is at least the sprite work isn't as discolored and poor this time, though it still isn't great, and well, the sound design... The sprite work isn't as discolored and poor this time. The one positive aspect I'll give this game is that after the first 3 stages, the game loops, and the stages are noticeably different, with little cracks and differences in the flow of the gameplay to spice it up a bit. Even though this isn't nearly as mind-blowing today, you've got to remember, this game's competitor was still Overall, this game is so incredibly mediocre. After I beat the game, I just felt like the game was warning me for the rest of this endeavor. Joke's on Crazy Kong though, I still have 48 more games to get through and 3 more years to procrastinate. I wish I could take the last 5 minutes back of my life. This is the first of many Donkey Kongs on the Game & Watch, and yeah, this is legitimately the only way I can play these games without selling my first child. If it's not obvious enough by the gameplay, this is a very poor interpretation of the arcade game. For starters, the input is extremely jarring and laggy, which isn't a surprise because, well... Girders constantly block your jumps over the barrels to add a form of challenge, which has about as big of quotes as I would give to describe this game as okay. And most importantly, even if you somehow make it through the barrels, there's an extra jump onto a crane hook that you have to time to make. And yes, you guessed it, half of the time, thanks to the input delay, you don't even make it. Regardless, this is a Game & Watch title, so I can't be too upset about its poor performance. This is definitely one of the weakest Game & Watch titles, coming in at a meager 3.5 out of 10, but for what it's worth, it isn't horrible. It did catch and hold my attention, and I wasn't necessarily not content while playing, so I'll give it that. I apologize profusely. The games before this are officially being changed to 10 out of 10s. Donkey Kong on the Atari 2600. Yep, it's just as bad as it looks. Mario is a Christmas cookie in this one. This game is disgusting. The sprite work is so bad here that the sprites of the backdrops are just stretched out images, which just makes these levels visually painful to get through. On top of this, the controls aren't any better. Half of the time when I jump, Mario is so big on screen that he either hits a barrel or just misses the girder completely. And get this, there's only one level in this port.
I think.
2 levels, even for a 1982 game, is ridiculous. This game took, and I'm not kidding when I say this, a whopping 8 minutes for me to complete. I could have finished half of my Halo Infinite video at that point. I know the 2600 wasn't known for its groundbreaking titles, but come on, man. This game is by far the worst I've played thus far. Could have been worse though. They could have given Mario some unworldly power to control the hammer with his mind. What? Donkey Kong on the ColecoVision. The first thing I noticed immediately playing this one was that Mario just doesn't hold the hammer in this version. What, would it kill one of your developers if they tried to add 2 extra sprites to the game? Oh. To be honest, this is just a slightly worse and washed out variant of the arcade version. My only complaint here is really 50M, which is just way too small for the amount of enemies on screen. Besides that, this is more of just what we've already seen. It's playable, it's just not really all that memorable. And we're back to unplayable garbage. This is Donkey Kong on the Coleco tabletop. This is a notoriously niche port with an oddly sad looking Donkey Kong. Listen, I get it's a handheld in 1982, but god, this game is disorienting. The controls are pretty responsive here, but one of the weird gimmicks of the screen is that Mario can't be on the same block as a fireball, even though each block of the screen has the fireball at a different length compared to Mario. This makes for a really disorienting and almost unplayable experience. The one thought that kept running through my head while playing this was, wow, Nintendo will really put Donkey Kong on anything that has a screen. We needed something new, and we needed something new fast. So, Donkey Kong Donkey Kong Jr. for arcade systems. Is this a safe space to say I didn't like this game as much as the original? I'm not sure what it is about it, but I know most of my disdain for this game comes from the fact it just doesn't feel like Donkey Kong. In Donkey Kong, the gameplay was simple. Jump over barrels, collect hammers to break them, and get to the big ape. In Donkey Kong Jr., there's a lot more moving parts here. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I did notice there's an over-reliance on climbing in this game, and there's no real power-ups here besides the fruit you can knock down on the ladders to kill enemies. The only stage that even slightly resembles the original Donkey Kong is the 3rd level here, which is also the only part I enjoyed. I also noticed that the controls in this game feel tighter than usual. I don't know if I was just starting to experience a new weird Donkey Kong mental disease by the time I played this title, but sometimes grabbing vines and platforming just felt slow. Overall, this game is okay. I mean, even the music is... Wait. Is that Johann Sebastian Bach playing? Was that on the bingo card for anybody else? This game just isn't the original for me. It could be a lot worse though. It could be Donkey Kong on the Intellivision. Anyways, let's just move on to another Donkey Kong. Hey, wait a minute, that's Donkey Kong on the Intellivision. Well, at least it can't get much worse than that. I mean, what do you expect me to say here? Who did Nintendo think they were fooling with this imposter? Who did Nintendo think they were fooling with this imposter? That's not Donkey Kong, that's the Joker. This is almost as bad as the Atari 2600 version. Almost. The sprites are way discolored and off. The controls are so damn stiff. Why do the zeros have lines in them? Are we even shocked though? I mean, this game comes from the same company who made Barbie. What do they know about Donkey Kong? Well, I guess apparently more than I do. Ugh, yeah, let's just combine two of my favorite headaches, Donkey Kong Jr. and the Game & Watch. Yeah, this plays just as well as you think. All things considered, it's not the worst. I really don't love how everything is more timing based here, or the time jump like the crane, or really anything about this game, but it's playable. Again, it's just not really that memorable for me. Alright, another Game & Watch game. Prepare for disappointment. Wait. Are my eyes deceiving me? Are my hands shaking? Is that Halo 5 in its rightful place? Yeah, that's right. This is the first fun Game & Watch game. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's not Mario.
You're right. This is a Mario.
You'll understand why this game is important later, but for now, just remember, this is Stanley. This game is really addictive. I ended up playing this game for way longer than I should have. It's a simple game at heart. You climb up and down the ladder, spray the bugs, and get rid of the spiders on the bottom screen, but boy is this game fun. I can totally understand how people played this game for hours when it released, and on top of that, did anyone realize what this game looks like? Not quite. That's right, this dual-screen Game & Watch paved the way for the idea behind the Nintendo DS, and for that reason alone, it's a massive innovation for Nintendo. Just the fact alone that it's a fresh type of game and not the same Donkey Kong port is just one of the many reasons why it gets such a great score here. Did I say a fresh game? What about more Donkey Kong Jr.? And unrelated, what's the nearest store for rope? Donkey Kong Jr. for the ColecoVision. This might be a take that nobody's ready for. I genuinely enjoyed this game more than the arcade version. Wait, I already said in the last video, put those pitchforks down. I don't know, man. There's just something so charming about this port. It's not better looking, that's for sure, but the controls are way tighter here and feel so much nicer to control as you swing through the vines and jump around. There's also a focus that leans more towards platforming and story elements rather than the climbing and arcade elements of the original version, which I personally love here. There's fewer and slower obstacles, a more strategic playstyle, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but if you wanted to try a Donkey Kong sequel, I'd say try this version first, and certainly not Donkey Kong 2 on the Game & Watch. If you're like me, I honestly didn't even know this game existed. This is a port of just the third level from Donkey Kong Jr., but oh, did you miss it? Yeah, that's right. This game uses keys around the map that you have to collect to unlock Donkey Kong. So this game is just all of the worst parts of Donkey Kong Jr. combined. This is a really stupid idea in theory, and you guessed it, just as stupid in practice. I had no fun playing this game at all, and as I played, the only thought in my head became, wait, isn't this supposed to be Donkey Kong 3? In general, this isn't a good excuse for Nintendo for a Donkey Kong 2, or 3, or whatever you want to call it. Mario Brothers on the Game & Watch. And no, despite the name, this isn't the game you think it is. Ironically, this is the first appearance of Luigi, and the Mario Brothers here take on a moving company? Yeah, because when I think of the iconic Super Mario Brothers, I think of U-Haul. I really like the timing element that this game has here. It can get pretty chaotic if you aren't paying attention to where the boxes are going. Despite this game being on the Game & Watch, this really isn't the worst thing in the world. But hey, speaking of games with names that don't equate to the gameplay, Donkey Kong Jr. on the Game & Watch. Ugh, let's just combine two of my favorite headaches, Donkey Kong Jr. and the Game & Watch. Wait, hold on, wait a minute. Did anybody else get a weird feeling of deja vu just now? So this is the second release of Donkey Kong Jr. on the Game & Watch, because I guess Nintendo was that desperate to f up again. This feels like a remake of the first title, but alright, I'll say it. We have our first good Donkey Kong Game & Watch title. This game is addicting. The platforming here is so fun. It's still got the clunky and laggy gameplay of a Game & Watch title, but overall, this is much more palatable to the average person. I didn't even hate the key aspect of this game that returned from Donkey Kong 2, because they're much more evident on a screen with color and can actually make the game sort of chaotic at times. Overall, this is a much better interpretation than the other game before it. My only gripe here would be I wish Mario made an appearance, and what if he was like, I don't know, a cement factory worker or something? Holy shit. This is Mario's Cement Factory for the Game & Watch. As you can probably tell at this point, Nintendo just wanted to slap Mario in the face of any game they made. And honestly, considering they just had created this atrocity, I don't blame them. This game is really confusing with the Game & Watch screen. The platforms are extremely hard to track when they move, the cement is really hard to see in the mixers at times, and because we only move 1 or 2 frames per second, the timing in this game is very tedious. This game is fine, it's sort of addicting, but could Nintendo really just not have made this game for the arcade? I feel like if there was an arcade release of this game, it would have performed so much better. However, just because of hardware limitations, it's getting a pretty low score. Donkey Kong on Atari 8-bit computers. What a strange release. This release marks one of the first times that a major Nintendo game hits Atari home computers, and it also marks one of the last times that a major Nintendo game hits Atari home computers. I can't necessarily blame Nintendo for going this direction. I mean, if I saw this, I wouldn't have trusted Atari either. Honestly, considering this was made from the ground up on one of the first major home computers, this isn't horrible. There are actually certain aspects of this port that I prefer to the original, such as the 25M barrel movement patterns, the less intense fireballs in 50M, and the general tighter movement control, but overall, I mean, this is just Donkey Kong again. It's not like Nintendo just crafted a whole IP at the flick of their wrist. Oh my god, Nintendo just crafted a whole IP at the flick of the wrist! Mario Brothers on arcade systems. And yes, this is the game that you think it is. And yes, we are almost 16 minutes into this. This is such a great arcade title. The music is so catchy and notable, whether it be the title screen, the Phase 1 music, the Game Over music, and this game just sounds like an arcade experience. Every little movement of this game has a bleep or bloop that goes along with it. It just sounds like a modern day pinball machine. The gameplay loop is so good here. Killing Koopas or sidesteppers, or even the fly enemies is just so satisfying. My only nitpick of this title is the loose controls here. Walking around just feels so damn slippery, which is ironic because later in the game, they introduce ice mechanics. These slippery controls make it so difficult to feel out each stage and understand where you're actually jumping to. Overall, this is an incredible introduction title for the Mario Brothers, and I don't really have many gripes with this game, hence the high score. And look at that, we made it just in time for a revolution in video game history. Donkey Kong on the NES. I mean, what is there to say about this game that hasn't already been said? Everything is improved here from the original. The physics, the scoring, the music, the sprite work, the levels, the difficulty. My god, this is the definitive way to play Donkey Kong. This is one of the most notorious video games of all time, and to put it simply, this game is the reason why the Mario Brothers franchise is as popular as it is today. This is the most iconic high score and monkey fun you can ever imagine on an older console like this, which made it that much better when it was paired up with Donkey Kong Jr. when the NES released. My god, what a duo for 1983! It almost makes you forget that this is the same company who said yes to this title. Again, almost. The controls, music, physics, enemy speed, sprite work, and even the god-awful climbing mechanics have been majorly revamped here. Jeez, Nintendo, you're actually making Donkey Kong Jr. playable. Please stop that. I genuinely really like both of these releases, and I can't tell you the stupid little smile I had on my face when revisiting these titles. I still don't love Donkey Kong Jr. as much as the original, no doubt about that, but these are by far the most definitive way to play these titles. Without these two releases, we wouldn't have the seed to plant for future releases. Has anyone learned of time travel so I can take back what I just said 4 seconds ago? Donkey Kong Jr. on the Atari 2600. This may not only be one of the worst Nintendo games I've ever played, but one of the worst games I've ever played, period. I guess I should have probably listened to Crazy Kong, huh? First off, that is just not Donkey Kong Jr. I do like how they used the same sprite for Donkey Kong as the 2600 title, and I think they tried to do the same thing with Mario, but dude, it's 2025. You can't do pink face. The physics here are also abhorrent. Jumping anywhere or even tabbing an input 9 times out of 10 kills you, especially when you're on a vine because the enemies look like the letter C and blend in with the background. This game is probably one of the worst I've played yet. Let me distract you from whatever disease I just contracted with another NES port. Mario Brothers on the NES. I can't lie to you and say I wasn't excited to play this release, and needless to say, my needs were met. Kind of. As always with the NES ports, the game's physics have been massively improved upon, and gone are the days of slipping and sliding trying to kill enemies. I will say though, one of my major gripes here is the sprite work. Why are the Koopas and crabs so skinny. I know, I can't believe Nintendo was advertising for Ozempic in 1983 either. I honestly prefer the arcade sprite work here, and honestly, this comes to be one of the weaker NES ports. I honestly feel like I can sacrifice the worst sprite work for the slippery controls of the arcade version, and I often find myself playing the arcade version more than the NES version. It could be worse though, we could be headed into a long trip of mediocrity for the next year. The Barbie Company's back. Donkey Kong Jr. on the Intellivision. Yep, this is the buggy mess you think it is. This is playable. And I say that with more hesitation than the time I said Sonic Origins exists. The collision detection and physics here are terrible, and considering we just had Mario Brothers on the NES before it, yeah, this isn't looking too hot. To be honest, I just think Mattel should stick to making Uno, which I do not know how to play because I can't count.
I think.
To help myself with my mathematical deficiency, here's Donkey Kong Jr. plus Junior's Sanzu lesson for the NES. Say that 5 times fast. Now, I know what you're wondering. What? This is a Japanese exclusive release that is identical to its NES predecessor, but with an educational math mode mixed in. At first, I was super confused with the math mode. Nothing seemed to work no matter where I moved. And then I realized, oh wait, this is the mode. The math mode just shoots random math questions at you that you can't get wrong. If I need scrap paper for my video games, I might as well just take the SATs again. And what do you get for completing the math mode, you might ask? Yeah, Donkey Kong and the ColecoVision sounds a lot better right now. This game is just Donkey Kong Jr. with a stupidly extraneous mode, so you already know the score. Let's just move on. Donkey Kong 3 for arcade systems. Isn't this technically Donkey Kong 4? Or is it Donkey Kong 2 since that never had a home release? Either way. Oh my god, look, distraction, it's a callback! That's right, Stanley makes a reappearance from Greenhouse, and as you can tell by the gameplay, this is literally Greenhouse 2. This game isn't even remotely similar to the other Donkey Kong games. Yeah, I sure wonder why that failed. This game's control scheme is horrible. The jump button to move up platforms is the same for jumping up on the top platform. You can see very quickly how most time this results in death. The reason Greenhouse was so successful in the first place is because it was incredibly simple and the controls were easy to feel out. Not because it's Timu Galaga. This game isn't horrible, just why was it named Donkey Kong 3?
You're right. This is Donkey Kong 3.
A shoot-'em-up platformer just doesn't work here. It's nothing like the rest of the franchise. Honestly, the only thing this game shot at was its chances of being remembered. Donkey Kong on the TI-99? Oh, wait a minute, it's the Calculator Company. This is definitely the most niche release of Donkey Kong, and also the most mediocre. If I were to nitpick anything, it'd be that the barrels give you 0 time to react when they drop as if they're nuclear bombs, and most sprites here are just static images. Though to be honest, I wouldn't expect anything less from the Calculator Company. This game is fine, it's just there. It's the kind of port that makes the Intellivision version look like a technical marvel, and that's saying a lot. Speaking of niche releases of Donkey Kong, here's Donkey Kong for MS-DOS. To start, when I booted this game for the first time, this is genuinely how it ran. Oh god. After tweaking some settings, the game ran. Okay, I can't hold it back anymore. This just might be one of the worst games I've ever played. For one, this game is a buggy mess. Every other frame, something disappears. I didn't have sound for a good majority of my playthrough. The hammer would just miss 9 times out of 10 when striking on an object. And who the is that ape? That's just a Yeti in my Donkey Kong. Another notable feature of this game is the horrible controls and collision detection. Regardless of if you press up, down, left, or right, you'll know because Mario just never stops moving. And God forbid even a fraction of his hitbox hit the barrel, the game just ends in seconds. This is an abomination of a game. It might be one of the worst titles I've ever played in my life. And to be honest, after seeing that game, I can't blame Mario for deciding to become a war criminal. They were really just picking at grass for ideas, huh? Mario's bombs away for the Game & Watch. This has got to be the dumbest Game & Watch game of all time. The idea is simple enough. Going up and down the line, avoiding fire and grenades to not set off your bombs. I had high expectations for the gameplay when I saw the cutscene at the beginning of the game, and I thought for a Game & Watch game it was pretty simple. And then I realized you can just spam left and right to get points. Did this game even go through testing? Did they just chuck it at a wall and say,
Yeah, Good enough.
I'm starting to believe that I was right when we said we were headed into a long year of mediocrity. Donkey Kong on the Apple II. Yes, you heard that right, a Nintendo game on an Apple product. Because nothing screams Apple like a beige box struggling to run a 2-year-old Nintendo game. First off, upon boot, this game didn't really have the warmest welcome. Oh my god, that's loud. Jesus Christ, that scared me. So, yeah, this is a direct port of the MS-DOS version. But who looked at that release and thought they wanted more of it? This game plays just as well as you think it does. It's just the MS-DOS version, but with different colors to spice it up a bit. To make matters worse, half of the text in this game isn't easy to read, so not only are you not able to play the game well, but you're also not able to understand it well either. What more is there to say here? You already know what's coming, so let's just get out of here already. Mario Brothers on the Atari 2600. I don't even know what I expected. I mean, what did you expect? All things considered, even with hardware limitations, this is actually a pretty decent port of the game. There's no music here, which I found kind of odd for this type of release, and the sound effects are pretty grating, but if you squint hard enough, the game does at least play like the original, so I can give it that. I literally had no other notes besides what I just said. This is just a much worse version of the arcade classic. Now let's get back to learning how to play Uno. This is Donkey Kong Jr. Math for the NES. I will wholeheartedly say that I fully thought this was just going to be the American release of Junior Sanzu Lesson, but I was wrong. This game just doesn't include the original. Alright, here's the new and improved Mario Kart title.
Oh.
This game is completely unrelated to the original game and focuses on a new Calculate mode. This mode is by far the most confusing educational game I've ever played. Nothing explains this mode at all, and it is extremely confusing. After I figured it out, it made a little more sense, but I need another friend for it. So of course, I tried asking. Hey man, you want to play some Donkey Kong Jr. Math?
Absolutely not. Only a dumbass would think that that's even remotely a good idea. Go die.
Well, it was worth a shot. Just like Junior Sanzu Lesson, you don't get anything for beating this mode, which means in its entirety, this package removes the main point of the game which it's based off of and adds an extremely confusing educational mode. Can you guess what I gave it? Donkey Kong on the Commodore VIC-20. This is a weird port. It's not bad, especially considering hardware limitations, and the game does a great job of imitating the original game. I mean, come on, they even added a falling animation to Donkey Kong in 50M. Besides that, though, this is just another port of Donkey Kong. Though, to give credit where it's due, this might be the only port where Donkey Kong falls with a higher frame rate than the Atari 2600 version, so we'll at least take that. Donkey Kong on the Commodore 64. This game isn't horrible. It does look like the arcade version, and I can respect them for at least trying to copy the sprite work, but god, this game is slow. Even the music and sounds just feel like they're being dragged like a dead body behind the visuals. This is just such a mediocre take on Donkey Kong. It's playable, but not something I'd ever want to come back to. I give Commodore props though, at least I didn't bomb their releases like Atari did. Oh, so that's what the past tense is. Does instead of did. Okay. Mario Brothers for the Atari 5600. I won't lie, based on the Atari logo at the beginning of this game, I had high expectations. Anyways, this game is even more janky than the arcade release. Since it's a port of the arcade release and not the NES release, this game is super slippery, and beyond that, Atari made some weird choices with the gameplay here. For one, you can't jump over enemies, so we already broke rule 1 of the Mario franchise. The fireballs also now have random attack patterns, which means their colors pretty much represent nothing. So now we've just broken rule 1 of gaming. These choices make for a really weird experience. I did not like this title if it's not evident enough already. Let's just ignore this one, I guess. Now, I won't lie to you. I've traveled to every webpage with this game's name in the title, the entirety of eBay, emulated footage of this game, and there wasn't even a lost media article. There are barely any images of this game online, whether it be gameplay or box art. I've seen more evidence of Sonic and Super Smash Bros. Melee than this game existing. There is simply only one video of it existing. Mario Brothers for the NEC PC 8001. I'm not sure if I'm bringing attention to this because I've never heard of such a release like this, but at this point, I am fully convinced that this game just doesn't exist. Whether it be gameplay footage, images, or any piece of evidence that this game does exist, it's all taken from this singular video. Based off of the evidence, I can totally see why this wasn't released. This game takes nearly 10 damn minutes to load, and even when it does, it plays worse than the Atari 2600 version of Donkey Kong played through a microphone. microwave. To be honest though, this game isn't necessarily a video game, it's much more of an urban legend, and because I didn't necessarily get to try it, this game just gets a 1 out of 10 from me. Listen, I get it's not the best score, but we're practically just bouncing between bad games at this point, so we'll take what we can get. Speaking of bouncing between disappointments, let's talk about pinball on the NES. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why is this here? Well, Mario makes an appearance in some of the bonus games here, because Nintendo apparently stuck with the motto of putting the Mario franchise on anything that had a screen. And before you ask, yeah, this is pinball. It plays exactly how you'd expect a pinball machine to work. And honestly, it's not even a creative pinball machine at that. There are a few secret tunnels to go through, some penguins and ducks on the board, and a weird poker obstacle, but overall, this is just a pinball machine I'd see if I walked into an arcade. This is such a basic game. It feels like the type of thing you'd see in a tech demo, not a full release. This game purely exists here for pinball players, and that's just not me. If pinball is your fancy, does it do its job? I guess, just not super creatively, but sure. You already know exactly what kind of score this game's gonna get. Donkey Kong Jr. for Atari 8-bit computers. Wow, they're really just trying to find every way possible to make this game worse, huh? Considering this is what came from Atari last time, I don't really have a ton to complain about here. But one of the more notable things about this game is that we indirectly have our first unofficial appearance of Wario, because apparently Mario showing up in yellow was Atari's way of saying, close enough. On top of that, the speed of the enemies returned from the arcade version, and this makes the game way harder to react to. Overall, this isn't a terrible job from Atari, it's just surprisingly competent for a company that almost defunct the entire franchise. Alright, on to the next game, which... Wait a minute, is anybody else getting a weird feeling of a year-old nostalgia? Yes, you are looking at Donkey Kong Jr. for the Coleco Adam correctly. This is just a port of Donkey Kong Jr. for the ColecoVision. Because when you buy a whole new computer, what you really want is the exact same game you already owned on a cheaper system. Ironically, I do believe that this port is slightly better than its predecessor, which is pretty cool considering I already hold that port in high regard. The enemies are even more slowed down, there are cutscenes in this game, and... Is that Jacques Offenbach's Can-Can? Alright, first you got me with Johann Sebastian Bach, but now you're telling me I get Jacques Offenbach? At this point, the math modes, let's just make Donkey Kong Jr. teaches music theory. This is a great port of the ColecoVision title, which is already a port of the arcade title. Does that mean that this game is like a portception? This game might not look better than the arcade or NES version, but boy, does it feel a lot better. 4! Sorry, did I scare you? Golf for the NES. The reason for this inclusion here is because you play as a much taller Mario in this game, though there is a wide debate on whether or not that's his actual name according to the manuals and Famicom release. Gameplay wise, this game just made me realize I just don't know how to play golf. I am terrible at this game. However, once I did understand it, the game just kind of became underwhelming. I mean, at least it's not the 16th copy of Donkey Kong, but it's just golf. If you were dying to play a golf video game in 1984, firstly, have you been convicted of any federal crimes? But secondly, there's a decent amount of content here. There's a total of 18 holes in this game, and each one is completely unique with sandbanks, waters, and trees in different locations. There are also a ton of club options, and they all hit the ball in various angles, so the game is replayable by that factor alone just to see the weird ways you'll hit the ball next. Besides that though, there's no real wow factor of this game, it's just golf with no real pizzazz. If that's what suits your fancy though, you might just be convicted of some federal crimes. Overall, it's not the worst release in the world, it's just kinda decent. Speaking of decent releases, what if I lied and told you Donkey Kong for the Coleco Adam was one? Remember how Coleco made a good version of Donkey Kong Jr.? Yeah, good times. Similarly to Donkey Kong Jr., this is just the ColecoVision again, except somehow worse. This game is so goddamn slow. For example, more times often than not, Mario will get stuck on ladders for around a couple of frames after you climb the top, and most times will get hit by a barrel. On top of this, Coleco added about 5 tons of weight to the spring in 75M. I mean, look at this. It's like they added a Looney Tunes anvil and shoved it into the game. This is just a much worse portception of the ColecoVision port, which is also a port of the arcade game. Jesus, I just said port so many times in that sentence, I think I'm now legally required to own a boat. Donkey Kong 3 for the NES. That's right. Hey, distraction. Look, another callback. Stanley returns once again, and though I believe this game has the worst title possible for it, like all the NES ports, this is a massive improvement. The sprite work looks significantly better, especially with Stanley, and the movement is adjusted adjusted to not kill you from jumping on the top platform every 5 minutes. I mean, come on, even the music sounds better, and overall, this game is actually pretty fun, which is weird because I went into this expecting more excruciating pain from Donkey Kong 3. One of my biggest complaints here, if I had to have one, is that this game is incredibly easy. A lot of the levels you can just completely cheese thanks to the power-ups and pretty much just skip the level. Overall, though the game is fun, it's definitely one of the weaker NES ports due to its lack of optimization. Speaking of lack of optimization, here's something disgusting. Welcome to Mario Bros. Special. This was one of Nintendo's first major mass releases, with this title being playable on 10 Japanese home computers, all of which play extremely similarly. Once again, like, I had to adjust my game because after some more tweaking, I did finally get the game to look and sound correct. The first thing I noticed is, this is not Mario Brothers. Listen, I know the title says special, but that doesn't mean it has to play like a bootleg made by one dude in Russia. This is nothing like the arcade game. This is a full-on platformer, and ironically marks the first time we see Mario primarily stomping on the heads of his enemies to kill them. This is a very unique take on the game, and while it isn't bad, it's just kinda weird. I wish that there was a little more thought put into this release. Like, could you imagine if it was a full-on release with a story? It could have been the Super Mario Bros. Before Super Mario Bros. Overall, I mean, it's not bad, but, you know, at least it's not golf. Stroke and match golf for Versus systems. First off, what the f is a Versus system? Essentially, Nintendo made their own unique style of arcade cabinets with 2 screens and 4 sets of controls. So, just 2 arcade cabinets combined. Nintendo sure was innovative at the time, huh? Nintendo did this in hopes of bringing a more competitive audience to their games, and yeah, when I think competitive, I think golf. Surprisingly, this release is much better than the NES version. The sounds, music, sprites, and even the gameplay has been slightly tweaked, and man, playing such a boring sport has never felt so good. And the same could be said for Versus Pinball, which was the next release for these consoles. The sounds have been improved, the controls are more responsive, the ball is encoded to pass between the 2 bumpers randomly, and wait, is that last one actually real? Yeah, so people discovered after this release that the ball in the NES version was just coded to make the game unfair. Looking back on it though, I mean, it's pretty obvious that this was meant to be the case. What a classic from Nintendo. Fun, but only when they want it to be. Both of these titles are super addicting. I mean, I could spend hours between the 2 of them. What great Nintendo games, and even better Mario games. Oh, wait, this video is supposed to be about the Mario franchise. Donkey Kong 3 Daigyakushu. I definitely just created a new stereotype reading that. What in the is this? Well, if it's not obvious by the incredibly large Made by ITA in the corner, this game was another playable on 10 Japanese home computers game published by Nintendo. It was also programmed by one guy from Hudson Soft, and yeah, you sure can tell. Donkey Kong 3 is already pretty far off from the rest of the Donkey Kong games, but come on, this looks nothing like a Nintendo game. You go to all sorts of weird places here, like the countryside, a highway, a bridge, and the aliens? The aliens? What's next? Donkey Kong 4 Stanley versus the Predator? Ironically, this game's backdrops actually look spectacular, especially for its time, but who am I kidding? Screw the backdrops, we just fought fucking aliens. Not only does this game look different too, it plays completely different than the original Donkey Kong 3. Remember how I made that joke about how Donkey Kong 3 plays vaguely like a Galaga clone? Well, it's not vague anymore. This is just Galaga. All the programmer did was add the Donkey Kong 3 Donkey Kong onto the middle of the screen, and voila! Seriously, what in God's name were they thinking? This is by far one of the most obscure, strange, almost fan-made looking releases of a game I've ever played. I mean, it's Galaga, so it's pretty fun. It's just, listen, I didn't expect my Donkey Kong experience to feature Mr. Greenhouse Stanley single-handedly repelling an alien invasion. Whatever, though, let's just move on and pretend like I never even saw this release. Versus Wrecking Crew for Versus systems. Yes, this is weirdly the first appearance of Wrecking Crew. As with the rest of the Versus system titles, this game focuses less on the puzzles and more on competitive play. Though, as we learned from the Donkey Kong Jr. math incident, I don't have friends to play these games with. The single player mode of this title is fine. I didn't really think it was that notable, to be honest. You can tell this was definitely the basic foundation for Wrecking Crew, but it clearly wasn't ready yet, so that's why this title gets a very mediocre score from me. I thought I had left you to die in 1983. Donkey Kong 3 on the Game & Watch. This plays nothing like Donkey Kong 3. In fact, this plays more like Pong with extra steps. Based on the title, which I highly disagree with, but this game technically had been Donkey Kong 4 or Donkey Kong 5. Alright, this bit is starting to get really annoying to write out. I can see how people found this game to be fun, and I love how you can play it with 2 people, but this is just Pong for the Game & Watch. I could have done that on a console over 10 years ago. Donkey Kong Circus for the Game & Watch. Hey, would you look at that? 2 Game & Watch games in a row. Wow. Did you know that's the gaming equivalent of a cry for help? Alright, so you remember Mario's Bombs Away? Great job, Nintendo. You abolished a war crime. Congrats. This is the exact same game verbatim, even with the same left and right scoring tactics. A year after it released. Game & Watch already wasn't selling well by this point. I don't know why Nintendo thought they could just ship yet another game with the Donkey Kong name off and it would save their dying toy line. At this point, slapping Donkey Kong on a Game & Watch was just like putting a band-aid on a sinking ship. Technically it's an effort, but it's just sad. That's not gonna help the boat float again. But hey, speaking of things that absolutely nobody asked for, let's talk about Punchball Mario Bros. This is by far one of the most obscure releases in Mario history, and even though it doesn't feature aliens or a poorly made math mode, it's definitely one that piqued my interest. First off, let's address the elephant in the room. What the heck is a punch ball? I know of a regular bouncy ball, but what balls do you punch besides my own when I'm playing Donkey Kong on the Apple II? Well, to answer that oddly answered question, a punch ball is a ball that you throw towards an enemy that walks your way in order to punch or kill them. So, a regular ball. So why was this released? Well, this isn't Mario Brothers, that's for sure. In fact, I'd argue that this game should have had the name Mario Brothers Special over the other disaster. First things first, the controls on this are awful. The button for jumping and throwing the punch ball is the same, but you only jump if you push a direction on the D-pad. This makes it incredibly difficult to navigate your way through the course. To make matters worse, and before I say this, let me just say, it gets so much worse here. I had a terrible realization while playing this game. No, this really isn't a joke. Dixie's Land is the theme of this game, which is also the same theme as the United States Confederacy. This is just another one of those cases like Donkey Kong 3 Dai Kyushu. This game just doesn't even feel real. But honestly, I'd rather it not feel real than feel like the Confederacy is coming back. And to end this nearly 40-minute round trip off, Donkey Kong Hockey on the Game & Watch. What a lackluster way to end this era off. This game is the perfect subpar finale for a trip that slowly devolved from a silly game with a monkey to literal aliens and Confederate propaganda. Remember how I said Donkey Kong 3 was Pong with extra steps? Okay, now just remove the words with extra steps. This is just Pong! I do like the little shooters that make the puck go faster, and it can get chaotic very fast, but really, Nintendo? You're gonna end off your 1984 with a second Pong clone? On top of that, this game just drags on forever. You'd think the game would end with the first of 3 or the first of 5, but no. It goes to 10 points, because apparently 5 just wasn't soul-sucking enough for Nintendo. This is definitely one of the weakest Game & Watch titles, even more so than the original Donkey Kong. It just goes to show again that Nintendo couldn't save their Game & Watch line by just sticking Donkey Kong on it. At this point, I'm surprised they didn't try to create a Game & Watch console called Donkey Kong Life Support. At least that would have caught more attention than this game got. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, a whole mayhem of Mario up through 1984. With about 50 games now crossed off the list, you can see Nintendo was definitely playing the long game here. I think it's definitely agreed upon that there were some highlights, some lowlights, and absolutely way too many ports of Donkey Kong in this era. And finally, with those dumpster fires behind us, we're finally crossing over into the year 1985. And thank God I didn't listen to Crazy Kong. I'm genuinely excited to see what's coming up, especially since we're inching closer to the golden age of Super Mario Bros. Now, if you'll excuse me, just give me a little bit of time. I've just realized that Intellivision hasn't made a Nintendo game since 1983. That's right, baby, another Donkey Kong crisis averted!